Hey everybody, it's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions, and the first question this week comes from Jason Payne, who says, there is one subject that I've noticed hasn't come up terribly often on your channel, at least that I recall, music. I know you've mentioned a little bit before, but what is your favorite music to listen to? Also, have you listened to the music from the Golden Record that Sagan et al. Attached to the Voyager spacecraft? And Zents29 also asked about what music I'm into. So let's talk about music, shall we? I haven't listened to the music on the Voyager record. I know generally what is on there, and a lot of it I've heard just as a matter of just listening to music throughout my life, but I've never actually sat down and made a point of listening to the music that was on the Voyager record. Maybe I should do that. Good suggestion. As for music that I'm into, I love rock and roll. I love Bruce Springsteen. I love Bob Dylan from all throughout his career. You know, I love the early Dylan, the pre-Highway 61 Dylan. Like, for instance, if you ever heard the song With God on Our Side, just an amazing, amazing song. And a lot of Dylan's early like protest music, like Masters of War. A lot of people have heard that song. It's still just as relevant today as it was when he recorded it in the Vietnam era. Just a really powerful, angry, bitter song. You know, I love the Rolling Stones. I love the Beatles. I love early sort of R&B / rock and roll when it was sort of still transitioning from one thing to the other, and it still had some country and some blues in it, like Carl Perkins, I think, is great. More modern stuff, I think I mentioned Springsteen. If I didn't mention Springsteen, I love Springsteen. He's like my hero. Modest Mouse is one of my favorite bands. I love them. I love Built to Spill. I loved Ben Folds 5, although I didn't really like... They got back together and did an album just recently, just last year, that I didn't think was very good at all. But in general, I love Ben Folds 5, and I love Ben Folds' first solo album, Rockin' the Suburbs, but his stuff since then hasn't been that great, I don't think. What else? I love bluegrass. I love country, not country that you would hear on the radio. I love more like country from the 60s and 70s, like Johnny Cash has never done wrong as far as I'm concerned. Willie Nelson has had a great career. Some guys that aren't usually thought of as country artists, but are, you know, or aren't played on country radio very much, but, you know, like Steve Earle or Robbie Fulks, especially. Robbie Fulks is just amazing. If you have, especially if you're an atheist, listen to Robbie Fulks, because he has a really great country song called God Isn't Real that is just fantastic. What else? All the various Hank Williamses throughout the years. I think Hank Williams, the first Hank Williams, the Hank Williams, is the best songwriter in the history of our culture. I think he is just the best that there ever was at songwriting, and wrote songs that were just like perfect little, the words fit together like puzzle pieces. They're so perfectly composed and so tight and so, you know, just not an unnecessary word, not an unnecessary note, and just a great performer. And I like Hank Williams Jr. too, even though we differ vastly on politics, and there are some of his songs that I kind of have problems with just for cultural things, like his song A Country Boy Can Survive, which is great until the last verse, when the city boy that the country guy had this wonderful friendship with gets mugged and murdered because he's a city guy, and the country boy says, "Oh, that wouldn't have happened to me because I'm a country boy." That kind of fucking spoils the whole thing, don't you think? And Hank Williams III is great too, in a completely different way. You have three Hank Williams doing things completely differently in three different ways, and it's great. Ray Charles, Sam Cooke. We're out of country now, if you hadn't noticed. I love the blues. I love Cephas and Wiggins, who were a Piedmont blues duo from around this area, from around Washington, D.C. And Phil Wiggins is still doing things, but John Cephas died a few years ago, unfortunately. But he was amazing, just a great singer, a great guitar player. I love John Lee Hooker. I love John Lee Hooker Jr. He's good. You know, the classic blues stuff like Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters and Big Bill Broonzy, just all kinds of... I could go on listing just artists that I like and genres that I like forever and ever and ever. But I like a lot of different kinds of music, and I have an MP3 player that is full of all kinds of shit that just cycles around and around and around. I mean, one song will be Billy Joel, the next song will be, you know, Sam Cooke, the next song will be like Tenacious D, the next song will be Liz Phair, the next song, I mean, just on and on and on. Troubleshooter 125 asks, are your video production skills, which are pretty decent, self-taught, or have you had some instruction to get you started? For that matter, what inspired or spurred you to become a vlogger? My video production skills are mostly self-taught. I've never taken a class or had any sort of formal instruction in video production, but I have picked up some very important tips along the way from people who knew more about it than I did. For instance, about a year or so ago, a little bit longer maybe, I got some very, very great advice, both in shooting and setting up shots and in editing, from a guy named Emery, who is actually the host of the Ardent Atheist podcast. He contacted me and said he liked some of my videos, and we had a few conversations both online and on the phone, and he gave me just some amazing advice that has really helped me, and I think improved the quality of my work as a result. So Emery, I owe him a great debt. And also working with Neon Reel Entertainment, our director and founder, Matt Matson, is not only a great visual eye for making a film, but he's just a good cameraman. He did professional video production for a bit before he moved on to the job he's doing now and started getting more serious into the film production. And I picked up some tips from him too, because he's great with a camera. He knows his way around the camera. He knows what to point it at. He knows what to do with it. And I have certainly benefited from working for him and collaborating with him. Absolutely. And what spurred me to be a vlogger? It was really, spur is a good word for it, because it was totally spur of the moment. I had been writing a blog for like 5 or 6 years, just writing articles about the same sort of stuff that I make videos about now. And I made a video just on a whim in response to Veritas 48's video of 5 questions for atheists. I answered the 5 questions. And that was my first YouTube video, and that was the first video of any kind that I had ever made of, you know, doing this sort of thing. And I really liked it, you know, I really liked it. And after I did that, I decided it was something I wanted to do more often. I went out and got a better camera. I made some more videos. I started getting a little more adventurous. I started sort of stretching out and doing different sorts of subjects, different topics, and it just sort of grew organically from there, based on my interest and based on things I wanted to try. It wasn't a plan at all. It was something that just sort of happened, and I'm very, very happy that it did, because it's so much fun and such fulfilling work to do. Jaybird196, oh, have you heard about this anti-gay Superman writer fellow, and what is your take on that? That anti-gay Superman writer fellow is Orson Scott Card, who is a science fiction author of note and also a homophobic bigot of note. And he's not just a guy who has occasionally expressed unfriendly opinions toward gay folks. I mean, I think he was on the board of the National Organization of Marriage or the American Family Association, or one of those big anti-gay marriage lobbying outfits. He's made it a point in public on several occasions to express his disdain for same-sex marriage and gay rights, and to lobby against it. So he's his anti-gay aspects are not just sort of minor things in his personality that you can just sort of ignore. It's right out front, and he's very open and very vocal about it, as he has every right to be. But I can't judge him as a writer because I've never read any of his stuff. I didn't even know who he was, to be honest, until he became infamous for his anti-gay remarks. I do think that it's interesting that he was even hired to write Superman, because, and I'm not saying that personal beliefs in general should automatically disqualify you from writing or from any particular job, but I do find it interesting, and I feel like it's a useful observation to make, that if he were known for expressing bigotry against, say, people of a different race than his own, or if he were expressing bigoted statements talking about limiting the citizenship rights of Jews or of women or of people of a particular religion, I don't think he would ever have been hired. Varmint Coyote, piggybacking on the question concerning circumcision, what do you think of the men's rights movement? I often find it to be a thin veil for a man's sexism, but I also think that's the same kind of bias that inclines many to consider most feminists to be feminazis, femitheists. Do you think maybe the two movements are, in their most professional elements, just egalitarian with focuses on different issues? Maybe they each need a name change as time goes on. Yeah, I agree with you about it's just a thinly veiled cover for male sexism, for chauvinism, and just for male bitchism, just for whining about things. I do not deny that there may be legitimate issues where maybe the rights of men are being pushed aside in favor of the rights of women in a few specific areas. I mean, I know you always hear about how in divorces where there are children involved, that the mothers generally tend to win custody battles over fathers, and that might be a legitimate issue where there's discrimination based on stereotypes about men and fathers. But overall, for the most part, the idea, the suggestion that there is such a thing in this culture as as feminine privilege is absolutely absurd to me. You men in the men's rights movement, you realize we still run this whole fucking show, right? You realize professional women still make, on average, 3/4 of what we make. You realize that, right? We're still in charge around here. I mean, it's preposterous. Little Millington 1, Steve, I go to a Christian school even though I am an atheist, and many people there don't believe in evolution. I've tried to persuade them, but they just don't agree. How would you try to persuade them? I've said this a few times before, but to me the best way to engage a religious person is first to talk to them about what they believe, to ask them questions. And in an honest, open way, not in like an adversarial, combative way, like, what about this, what about this, what about this? I mean, just ask them what they believe and then ask them why they believe it. And sort of gently get them to start accounting for their own beliefs, because that's very important. That most people who are atheists, at least in my case and in the case of other people that I've spoken to about it, most people who are atheists because that is the most likely, the most plausible belief about the world, about the existence of gods, etc. That religious beliefs are not defensible to them. They have no reason to believe those sorts of things. And if you get a religious person to open up with you about their beliefs and to try to explain both to you and to themselves in many cases why they believe these things, you can at the very least you can get them to express the not so great reasons that they have for believing. I mean, because ultimately it comes down to, well, that's just what I believe, or that's what the Bible says, or God says you have to have faith. You know, it comes down to something like that. There is no real reason. I've never heard a compelling, actual, objective reason to believe that gods exist. I've never, ever heard it. I don't think it exists. But I think you also have to be mindful here of how much importance you place on persuading people. Because I personally am not an outspoken atheist because I hope to persuade lots of people to become atheists. Ultimately, I don't really care. Changing people's minds, getting Christians to become atheists is not really why I do it. I do it because I think that my point of view and the point of view of other atheists deserves to be heard, and I think that it's better all around when people express themselves, when people say what's on their mind, and when people stand up and put their views and their opinions out into the world so that we can talk about them. And so when I talk to a religious person about atheism or about their religion, I'm not really trying to persuade them. I'm trying to challenge them. I'm trying to tell them why I disagree with them and why I don't think that their view makes sense, but I don't expect that they're going to change their minds. They rarely do. and that's not really why I do it. So I think you should focus less maybe on trying to persuade people, and more on holding up your end, accounting for your atheism, explaining why you don't believe, and also asking them to account for their belief. And hopefully you'll have some really interesting discussions as a result of that. Bass Bait, Steve, what are your thoughts on dreams? Do you have vivid dreams, dull dreams, or even no dreams at all? Do you think dreams are symbolic? I once had a dream that included you giving a 24-hour stream of you just doing whatever. What do you think that is supposed to mean? Oh, Bass Bait, I am not qualified to analyze your dreams about 24-hour streams of me. That's something you're going to have to talk to a professional about, my friend. But yeah, honestly, in general, I don't think dreams are that interesting. I mean, can they be symbolic? I'm interested in the idea. I actually watched a documentary from, I guess it was from Nova from a few years ago. I watched it on Netflix a while back about dreams and what they are, and how they work and what they do for us. And the idea that dreams are our brain's way of reviewing things or rehearsing things is really interesting to me. Like, they did a study where they found that if you do an activity and then you dream about doing that activity and then you do the activity again after the dream, that you're actually better at it, that the dream increases your skill. That's really interesting to me. But in general, I'm just not that interested in dreams. If you ever want to have a conversation with me that you know I will hate, tell me about your dreams. Because I just don't care. I do not fucking care. ZenCat999. Steve, I am curious about what webcam you use. It's always so clean. What's your recording editing setup? Well, actually, if you go back and watch the first episode of this series, if you go back and watch You Had to Ask #1, I talk about my setup. I show you my camera, I show you my lighting setup back in that video. Basically, and it's not a webcam. That's part of the reason why it's so crisp and clear. It's not recorded on a computer. It's not a webcam. It's a Canon Vixia S21, and it's a really, really good camera. And it's well lit. I feel like a broken record because I say this every time someone asks me for production advice. The best thing you can do, no matter what camera you have, is to light yourself properly. I have two lights, one here and one here. I have a light behind me for a backlight. When I do green screen stuff, I have all of those lights, plus I have a light on either side of the green screen to light the screen so I get a relatively clean key. Lighting is absolutely vital, no matter what camera you have. No matter how shitty of a webcam you have, it will always look better if you properly light yourself. And white balance and adjust everything so it look. I mean, believe me, that makes a huge difference. And that's it. That was the last question. Before we get out of here, let's do a shout out. The shout out this week goes to Xander's Meteor. Xander's Meteor has a great channel. We have corresponded a bit. He comments on my stuff sometimes. Great dude, great channel. The main points of interest on Xander's Meteor channel are he hosts a podcast called Atheist Impact that he uploads on his YouTube channel that is really interesting, and he uploaded his own series similar to this one, a Q&A series called Xander's Answers, and it was really interesting. And he uploaded 10 parts of that that are all about 10-15 minutes each, and definitely worth you checking out. And he has standalone videos as well. They're all really interesting. It's a really great channel. Deserves a lot more attention than he has gotten at the moment. He's under 2,000 subscribers. So if you have never watched anything by Xander's Meteor, never checked out his channel, check out Xander's Meteor. That's the shout out this week. And I will be back next week to do this again, presuming, of course, that you ask me more questions that I can answer, because as the title of this series possibly has tipped you, you have to ask in order for me to do this. In order for me to answer your questions, you must ask the questions, which you have throughout the series in great numbers, which I so very much appreciate, because I couldn't do it without you. I always have more questions than I know what to do with. I always have more questions asked than I can answer in a video. And often I even have to cut questions that I have answered on camera from the video, so it doesn't wind up being like an hour long. So please, if you have anything to ask me, anything you want to hear me talk about, anything you want my opinion on, anything you want advice about, I'm not very good at it, but I'd be willing to give you advice that would possibly ruin your life just for the sake of having content on my YouTube channel. So ask me anything. Nothing's too personal, nothing is off limits. Anything you want to know, facts and figures, opinions, advice, recipes, favorite Olympic games. Don't ask that one. I don't really have an opinion on that. Anything you want to know other than what my favorite Olympics are, because I don't really have an opinion. Anything other than that, ask and I will answer if I decide to answer. That's really it. I don't know. I got nothing else. See you next week.